أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On this video, we want to talk about the correct way of performing salah, or as some people call it, namaz. And as you know, every school of thought, every sect, every mazhab has their own way of performing salah. And on this video, we want to focus on the first thing, which is where to place your hands while you're standing for salah. So as you know, every school of thought, every mazhab, every sect places their hand in a different place. Like the Hanafis place their hands here, the Shafi'is here, and the Salafis, some of them do it like this and some of them do it like this. And so, and also the Malikis like this, and the Shias also, and the Shias and the Khawarij, they also place their hands here. And every sect thinks that only they have evidence for how they perform salah. And they keep saying that we have hadith for how we perform salah, but they don't realize that other groups also have ahadith in support of how they perform salah. So it's not just the Salafis who have evidences. The Hanafis also have evidence, and the Hanafis have written many books where they show evidences from hadith books that you must place your hands here during salah. For example, in Sunan Abu Dawud, there is that narration in Sunan Abu Dawud that you must place your hands here. But there are narrations in Sahih Bukhari that say you have to place them here or here. And so the question is, who is right? And they all have their evidences. It's not like the Salafis often think that only they have evidences or that only they have authentic evidences. But the truth is that every school of thought, every mazhab has their own evidences for how they perform salah. And the reason for all these differences is because people are only focusing on the hadith books, or on the books of their scholars, or on the books of their mazhab, or the salaf, or the tabi'in, or the Ahlul Bayt, but no one is looking at the Quran. And the reason why it's so important to see what the Quran has to say is because it's not just because the Quran is the book of Allah. I often tell people, look, here's the evidence from the Quran, and they say, do you have any confirmation from the hadith? And I say, no, we don't need confirmation from the hadith. Even if I do, we don't even need confirmation from the hadith. That is a sickness in your heart, that you think that we need a hadith to confirm what is already in the Quran. And I'm not a hadith rejecter, but we don't need the hadith to confirm the Quran. If anything, it's all the way around. We need the Quran to we need the hadith to be confirmed by the Quran. We don't need the Quran to be confirmed by the hadith. We don't need the perfect words of Allah to be confirmed by the hadith. And so I'm going to explain why you have to actually perform salah like this. This is the correct way of performing salah. And my proof is directly from the Quran. It's not from the hadith. As I said, in the hadith you have this, you have this, and you have this. And from some of the early Muslims, you have this. Some of the early Muslims, especially in Medina, were known to perform salah like this. Although I believe that those were the Yahud of Medina that the Prophet warned about, the Jews of Medina. And that's why the Shias and the Khawarij perform salah like this. And the Malikis, when you ask them why do you perform salah like this, they say it's because of the people of Medina. But the Prophet often used to warn about the Jews of Medina. But in reality, all of these are from Judaism, all of these. The whole idea of placing the right hand over the left hand, that is actually a Jewish belief, that you must place the right hand, meaning Michael, in Judaism is symbolic of the angel Mikael. You have to place that above the left hand, which they say is Gabriel. So when you're placing your right hand over the left hand, that's actually part of their ideology, that you must place your right hand, meaning Mikael, over Gabriel, meaning that Gabriel is lower then Michael. Michael is higher and Gabriel is negative. Michael is positive and Gabriel or Gabriel is negative. So even the Hanafi, Maliki, the Hanafi, Shafi'i and Salafi or Hanbali ways of performing salah are also based on Judaism. And what they did was that they divided the Muslims into these groups so that they gave us fake choices. So that we would be arguing over, oh, is it like this or is it like this? When in fact all of them are wrong. The Quran tells us what is the correct way of performing salah. And I'm going to be showing you evidence from the Quran, but before I do that, because I know that many people are going to say, where's the evidence from the hadith? When I show you the evidence from the Quran, everyone's going to say, a lot of people are going to say, you need to also show proof from the hadith. Where's the confirmation from the hadith? Well, This is the Quran, right? This is the Quran. This is the book of Allah. The Quran, the Quran, the Quran, however you want to pronounce it. The Quran, even if we forget for a moment that this is the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that these are the words of Allah, okay? So these are above any hadith narrated from certain people, from the companions who narrated from the Prophet. These are the perfect words of Allah. But now, let's forget that for a second, okay? Let's suppose that the Quran was just like any other hadith book. It was a book of hadith narrated by Umar ibn Khattab or by Uthman or by Ali from the Prophet, okay? From Abu Bakr from the Prophet or Umar from the Prophet. At the very least, you would have to say this about the Quran, right? Because who wrote the Quran? Who compiled the Quran? Mainly it was Umar radiallahu anhu, but also Uthman and mainly it was Umar and Uthman radiallahu anhu, but also to some extent it was Abu Bakr and Ali radiallahu anhu as well. So the companions of the Prophet, the Khulafa Rashidin, they themselves compiled this book. Now, if this was just a hadith book, imagine this. Imagine we had a hadith book today that narrated directly, okay, directly from the Prophet. We had a hadith book written by Umar radiallahu anhu, or Uthman radiallahu anhu, or Ali radiallahu anhu, or Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, or any of the Sahaba that directly narrated from the Prophet. How much more valuable and authentic would this hadith book be compared with even Sahih Bukhari? Sahih Bukhari was written 200 years after the Prophet. And most other hadith books were written between 150 to 300 years after the Prophet. And the Shia books were written even after that, even later than that. So let's suppose, we have a hadith book written, the oldest hadith book that we have today were written 150 years after the Prophet, okay? So we have a hadith book written 150 years after the Prophet. And we have another hadith book written shortly after the Prophet by his own companions and his family and his successors, okay? Now, think about this for a moment, okay? We have a hadith book written at the time of the Prophet or shortly after the Prophet by his own companions, by his own successors. And we have a hadith book written by someone 200 years later or 150 years later. If we had a contradiction between these two hadith books, every sane person would prefer the Quran over any other hadith book. So even if the Quran was just another hadith book, like Sahih Bukhari or Sunan Abu Dawud or Sunan Tirmidhi or Sahih Muslim or Mustadrak al-Hakim or Sunan Nasa'i or Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal or Musannaf Abdul Razzaq or any other, okay? If it was just another hadith book, the fact is that it's by far the oldest and most authentic book. And for example, in Sahih Bukhari, we have A narrating from B, who narrated from C, who narrated from D, who narrated from one of the companions, who narrated from the Prophet. And here is one example from Sahih Bukhari. It is narrated from Abdullah ibn Maslama, who narrated from Malik, who narrated from Abi Hazim, who narrated from Sahl ibn Sa'd, that the people were ordered to place their right hand on the left forearm in the prayer or in the salah. Abu Hazim said, I knew that the order was from the Prophet, peace be upon him. Now, this is just one of the contradictions regarding how to perform salah in the hadith. And I'm not going to show you all the contradictions on this video because that would take many hours, and there are many books written about this that are hundreds of pages long. Okay, so there are many contradictions about where to place your hands and how to what to say and what to do during the salah. And this is just one of these contradictions. But what I want to point out here is that, look, Abdullah ibn Maslama, so that's one person. He narrates from Malik, 2 people. Abi Hazim, 3 people. Sahl ibn Sa'd, 4 people. Okay, so there are 4 people up to the Prophet, peace be upon him, himself. So there's A narrating from B, from C, from D. And yet, the Quran is A narrating from the Prophet, even if the Quran was just a hadith book. So I'm just stressing to show you how superior the Quran is to any other hadith book. Because even if the Quran was just a hadith book, that alone would make it the most authentic, by far the most authentic hadith book. And it would be ridiculous to follow the hadith that we find in books written 200 years later when we already have the answer in the Quran? If the answer is already in a hadith book written at the time of the Prophet or a few years after the Prophet, how much more superior is that to a book written 200 years later during the rule of a bunch of tyrannical kings under the Abbasid kingdom, by people who had never even met the Prophet? So even if the Abbasids were good kings, even if they were good people, the point is that the people back then never met the Prophet. They were narrating from one person, from another person, from another person, from another person. I mean, how ridiculous is it that we place such a hadith at the core of our religion instead of the Quran? Yes, of course. I'm not saying that these hadith books have no value. I'm saying that when we already have the answer in the Quran, we don't need the hadith. We don't need a book written 200 years later. When we already have the answer in the Quran, it is very disrespectful to the Quran. Now think about this. We claim to believe that the Quran, however you want to pronounce it, I prefer to pronounce it as Quran because that is the dialect of the people of Yemen, and the Prophet praised the people of Yemen many times. Okay, so that's why I pronounce it as Quran. So the Quran is the best pronunciation. Okay, so for those munafiqin who mock me, you have to know that the best way of pronouncing the Quran is the Quran. That is the best and most authentic pronunciation. So the Quran, which we claim to believe is the words of Allah, is not only the words of Allah, but it's also the oldest hadith book. So this is why, as I said on my video about Ibrahim alayhi salam and other videos, on the video about circumcision, when we already have the answer in the Quran, there is no contest with the hadith. Okay, there is no contest. Because firstly, the Quran is the perfect words of Allah, whereas the hadith are the words of people who narrated from each other, and then they were copied generation after generation, similar to the Torah and the Bible and the Zabur and the Psalms, So first of all, the hadith books are like the Bible and the Torah and the books of the Ahl Kitab. They were copied by scribes from generation to generation, and also the hadith books were written 200 years after the Quran by ordinary people, not by the Prophet, not by his companions, not by his family, not by his wives or his cousins or his successors or the Khulafa Rashidin. It was written by various people from Persia, from Arabia, from all over the world. Imam Bukhari was from Bukhara. Imam Ahmad, I think he was, I can't remember, he was an Arab, but I think he was from Iraq. I can't remember, but he was an Arab. And so Persians, Arabs, various people wrote down these hadith books. So when I show you the evidence from the Quran that about how we should perform salah, don't get angry and say, oh, but there's no support for this from the hadith. We don't need hadith when we have the answer in the Quran. If the Quran says La ilaha illallah, and we have a hadith that says no, actually there are 4 gods or 5 gods or 3 gods or any other number of gods, does that hadith have any value? No. The Quran already tells us there is only one God. So when the Quran tells us something, you have to take it from the Quran. And we must only accept those ahadith that agree with the Quran. If any hadith says something different, we either reject it or we put it aside, because it could be that hadith has some kind of mistake, or maybe we don't understand it. But some people say no, we have to assume that we never understand the Quran, even though the Quran itself says that it is easy to understand. Okay, so Allah tells us that the Quran has been revealed in such a way that it is easy to understand. Yet we are told the total opposite. We are told that no, the scholars are easy to understand, the hadiths are easier than the Quran, and the Quran is impossible for us to understand. The Quran is only meant for the prophets, and the hadiths are only meant for the scholars, and we must only follow those so-called scholars, even though those scholars can't even agree on where to place their hands during salah. So it's crazy what we are being told. Okay, so how are we supposed to perform salah? Where are we supposed to place our hands? That's the first thing. where are we supposed to place our hands during Salah? Where I already demonstrated where we should place our hands. We must place it on our neck, and we must place both hands together. So it's not the right hand over the left hand, but it's both hands together placed on the neck. Now, why is that? Well, the answer is in the Quran in Soorah Al-Kawthar. And this surah has been interpreted in different ways. There are different contradictory interpretations of this surah. So you see, the answer as to where we must place our hands during the Salah is already in Soorah Al-Kawthar. But this surah is misinterpreted in mainly two different ways. These are the main two contradictory ways in which this surah is interpreted. That's why people of the Shia sect and those of the four mazhabs do not follow this surah correctly. But let's see if the interpretations given by the Shias and the four mazhabs in general, let's see if the interpretation of this surah actually makes any sense or not. Well, the first interpretation is that Kawthar is the name of a river in paradise, which only the best Muslims will drink from. In fact, in Sahih Bukhari, it says that even some of the Sahaba will not drink from this river. So only people who are going straight to paradise, because some people will be punished for their sins and then they will go to paradise. But some people will go straight to paradise. And in Sahih Bukhari, not in Shia books, but in Sahih Bukhari, it says that even some of the companions of the Prophet will not drink from this river. And now, as far as the river is concerned, I agree that Kawthar is the name of a river in paradise. The Shias say that Kawthar is the title of Fatima radiallahu anha. As you know, the Shias always want to connect everything in the Quran with the 12 Imams and with Fatima, even if it's completely out of context, as in the case of Laylatul Qadr. As I explained before, they even say that Laylatul Qadr is Fatima. But both these interpretations are actually given in Tafsir Ibn Kathir. But both these interpretations are wrong. Now, the Sunnis generally follow the first interpretation, that Kawthar is the name of a river, and the Shias say that it is Fatima. But the problem with the Sunnis is that although they are right that that Kawthar is a river, they misinterpret the rest of the surah, which is why they do not perform Salah correctly today, because of the Abbasid influence, because they follow the Abbasid Madhahib and Salafism and other ideologies that all go back to the time of the Abbasid era. And because the next ayah says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ, which means perform Salah to your Lord, and wanhar is translated and interpreted as meaning slaughter, meaning sacrifice an animal. Now, what kind of sense does this make? Think about it. According to the tafsir of Ibn Kathir, this surah is saying, verily we have given you the river of Kawthar, therefore perform Salah. So far it makes sense, but then it says, and slaughter an animal. What does that mean? Perform Salah and slaughter an animal. What is the connection? What kind of sense does that make? We have given you the river of Kawthar, therefore perform Salah and kill an animal. And then the next ayah is, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن شانئك هو الأبتر. Verily it is your enemy who is cut off. And this is interpreted in Tafsir Ibn Kathir as follows. That is, the one who hates you, O Muhammad, peace be upon you, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and hates that which you have brought, is defective, insignificant, despised, and is cut off. According to Ibn Abbas, Mujahid, Sayyid ibn Jubair, and Qatada, the surah was revealed in regard to Al-As ibn Wa'il, for it was said that he used to say, whenever Allah's messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam was mentioned, he would say, leave him, for he is a man who is cut off and is of no consequence, and if he were killed he would be forgotten. And so Allah revealed in this surah in response. It was also said that it was revealed concerning Uqbah ibn Abi Mu'ayt, and it was Ibn Abbas and Ikramah are reported to have said that it was revealed in regard to Ka'b al-Ashraf, and the number of pagans of Quraysh. Al-Bazzar reports from Ibn Abbas that Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf approached Mecca, and the people of Quraysh said, "You are their leader. Do you not see this weak, feeble, despised man who is without family or any who might help him, and who is cut off from his own people? He claims that he is better than we. We are the people of the pilgrims and the custodians, the suppliers of water." He said, "You are better than he." So Allah revealed this surah. This is an authentic narration. Atta said that it was revealed concerning Abu Lahab. This was when the Prophet's son died, and Abu Lahab went to the polytheists and said, "When his sons die, he will no longer be remembered." Far from that. On the contrary, Allah has preserved his memory for all the people, for all the world to witness, and has placed the responsibility of implementing his revealed law upon their shoulders forever until the day of congregation and the appointed time arrives. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon him always till the day of assembly. So we see that right here Ibn Kathir has given 4 different contradictory interpretations of the last ayah of Soorah Al-Kawthar. And the Shias actually follow the last one, the 4th one. The Shias say that this is saying that Abu Lahab said that the Prophet's family is going to be cut off. He's no longer going to have any descendants. And so the Quran is saying, "Verily we gave you Fatima, and so through Fatima you will have many descendants." This is the Shia interpretation, which seems to make sense. If you just take the first ayah and the last ayah, it seems to make sense. But the problem is, again, the second ayah. The second ayah says, "So perform salah and sacrifice an animal," according to the Shias. So what does that mean? So we have given, let's just follow the line of thinking, the interpretation of the Shias for a moment. Let's see what they're actually saying. The Shias are saying that this surah is saying, "Verily we have given you Fatima, your daughter Fatima. So perform salah and kill an animal. Verily it is your enemy who will not have any descendants." As I said, the first and the last ayah, the way the Shias interpret them, they kind of connect to each other. But the second ayah is perform salah and kill an animal. Why is performing salah placed next to killing an animal, sacrificing an animal? What's the connection? I mean, if it said perform wuzu and perform salah, okay. If it said perform salah and pray and do dua, okay. But perform salah and kill an animal? What kind of sense does that make? Where's the wisdom? Where's the meaning in this surah? What is it even supposed to mean? And if you go by the other 3 interpretations given by Ibn Kathir and many other Sunni scholars, it's saying that we have given you the river of Kawthar in paradise, therefore perform salah and sacrifice an animal, because your enemy will be cut off from his people. Your enemy will not be remembered and will not be connected to his family any longer, not you. So again, what kind of sense does that make? The second ayah clearly proves that both these interpretations are completely made up. They're wrong. All 4 of the interpretations are to stay. And you have to understand that when Ibn Kathir says that this is according to Ibn Abbas and Sayyid ibn Jubayr and Qatada and Mujahid, Ibn Abbas, these people did not necessarily say these things. This was narrated from them. In the same way that we have narrations from the Prophet, we also have narrations from Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu. That doesn't mean that Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu actually said this. These are all fabricated narrations. All 4 of them are fabricated narrations, and they all contradict each other. And the reason why they all cannot make sense of the second ayah is that the second ayah is actually that's the secret. That's the secret that contradicts Shiism and all 4 madhabs of the Abbasids, including the Salafis who take their madhab from the Hanbalis. It refutes all these groups that we see today, all the sects, all the madhahib, all the schools of thought, all the scholars that we see or hear about today are refuted in the second ayah of this surah, and that's why their interpretation of this surah makes absolutely no sense, especially their interpretation of the second ayah of this surah. It makes no sense at all. And so what does it actually say? It says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ. So perform salah to your Lord and wanhar. What does wanhar mean? Well, wanhar, according to Ibn Kathir himself, it can mean to slaughter an animal, but it can also mean to raise your hands for salah. And then we have another interpretation mentioned in the tafsir of Tabari, where he narrates a narration allegedly from Ali radiallahu anhu that says, wanhar means to place your hands on your chest during salah. And this is why the Salafis today place their hands on their chest during salah. Okay, and based on this, is based on some narrations such as this narration. And here's the question: so does wanhar mean to raise your hands up before you perform salah when you say Allahu Akbar, or does it mean to place your hands in the middle of your chest as stated in the tafsir of Tabari, or does it mean to slaughter an animal? What is the meaning of the word wanhar? Well, the wa means and, but what does it mean? What does the word actually mean? It means, according to the dictionary, it means to actually stab an animal, especially a camel, with a spear in the neck, or stab an animal in the neck, but with any weapon, but usually with a spear, with any weapon, with a knife or a spear in the neck. That's what the word wanhar literally means. And obviously it cannot mean raise your hands up and place your hands on your chest at the same time, because those are two very different movements. Raising your hands up to say Allahu Akbar and placing your hands in the middle of the chest are two contradictory interpretations. And so what is it actually saying? It's saying perform salah and wanhar. Now the tafsir of Tabari actually makes some kind of sense, at least, because placing your hands on your chest is done during the salah. So I agree with this narration from Tabari that wanhar is related to performing salah. It is not about sacrificing an animal, because that's totally out of context. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Perform salah and kill an animal? Doesn't make sense. Perform salah and place your hands on your chest? Well, that does make sense, but the problem is that wanhar does not mean to place your hands on your chest. Wanhar means to stab with a knife or a spear. So if the word wanhar is related to salah, which we know it is, it obviously is, from the context of the Quran we know that it is, then it cannot mean placing the hands in the middle of the chest, as it literally means to stab the neck. So the movement we have to make during salah is not to place our hands in the middle of the chest, because you don't place your hands in the middle of the chest if you want to stab someone or something in the neck. If you want to stab someone or something in the neck, you place your hands on your neck like this, or on their neck or on your neck like this. So this is the movement that the Quran is describing. This is the movement known as nahr or wanhar. It is to place the hands like this, as if you're holding a knife or a spear or a weapon and stabbing in the neck. Now you might say, but why are we doing this? Okay, so this is the correct meaning. Okay, but why should we place our hands like this? What is the wisdom? What is the meaning? What is the point? Why are we doing this? Are we doing this to demonstrate that we're committing suicide? Are we killing ourselves? Are we harming ourselves? Well, the answer is actually given in the very next ayah. Now you actually can understand what this surah means, and you can actually see that the verses, the ayat, are connected to each other and they make a lot of sense. Contrary to the four interpretations we looked at earlier, the Shia interpretation and the other three interpretations, the real interpretation makes a lot of sense. The very next ayah explains to us. So you may say, as I said, you may ask, so does this mean that we are stabbing ourselves? No, the next ayah says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن شانئك هو الأبتر. it is your enemy who will be cut. So are we cutting ourselves? No, we are cutting our enemy. Who is our enemy? Shaitan. The word shaitan actually means enemy or adversary. Shaitan is the enemy of mankind. And in Musnad Ahmad and Sahih Muslim, it is narrated that everyone has a shaitan who is assigned specifically to them. So there is a shaitan who is specifically trying to deceive you. And there is a shaitan who is trying to deceive me. And so when I perform salah like this, what I'm doing is that I'm stabbing that shaitan who is trying to control me in the neck. You see, because we are not physically stabbing ourselves, obviously, we are making the movement of stabbing. So we're not physically stabbing, we are spiritually stabbing the shaitan that is trying to control us and be inside our body. So that shaitan is trying to be you, is trying to be inside you and control your movements. And so you're stabbing him with a spiritual weapon in the neck. And it is narrated in the hadith that shaitan speaks through the mouth of certain people. So when you do this movement of spiritually stabbing shaitan in your neck, you're preventing him from speaking through your mouth. You see, because the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that shaitan speaks through the mouth of a lot of people. So if you don't want shaitan to speak through your mouth, what do? You stab him in your own neck. Because the shaitan is in your neck, so you're stabbing him in your neck to prevent him from speaking through your mouth, from saying bad things through you, from saying things through you that would deceive or confuse other people. So you're preventing the shaitan from making you say bad things or say things that you didn't mean to say. Because sometimes we say things that we didn't even intend to say. And that's when shaitan is influencing us. We may not be fully possessed. There are a lot of people, there are some people who are possessed and there are some people who are not possessed, but shaitan is still influencing them. Shaitan is influencing them to eat certain foods or to say certain things, and shaitan is feeding on some of the foods that we eat in the form of parasites. And shaitan is living inside our body in the form of gallbladder stones, for example. That's why the Quran says that in hellfire, people and stones will burn together, because the stones that you have inside your body, those are shayateen. And that's where idol worship came from. The idol worshippers were worshipping these stones that are actually shayateen. They are satanic stones. And that's why the Quran says in Surah Al-Baqarah that stones and people will burn together in hellfire. And also al-hijara, humans and stones. And in the same ayah, Allah refers to the people of hellfire and the stones as kafirin. So the stones are actually kafir. Why? Because these stones, this is the form that the shayateen take. You see, so there are devils, they are shayateen inside your body. Even if you're not possessed, they're still inside your body and influencing you. And so there are foods that we can eat and there are things that we can do to get rid of the shayateen in our bodies. And inshallah, I will explain about that on future videos. But what I want to explain here is the most important thing, and that is how to spiritually fight against shaitan. First, we must defeat shaitan spiritually. This is the most important thing before we do it physically. And there are physical ways as well described in the ahadith. I'll get into that on future videos. But the spiritual way of defeating shaitan and stabbing him, cutting him off is by spiritually stabbing the neck. And that is the meaning of wanhar. And that's why the next ayah says, verily it is your enemy who will be cut off. When you do this, it's your enemy, it's your shaitan who will be cut off, not you. So you're not stabbing yourself, you're stabbing the shaitan within yourself. And now you see how this surah makes so much sense. Let's begin reading it from the beginning and see what it's actually saying. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Inna a'tainaka al-Kawthar. Verily we have given you the Kawthar. A'tainaka al-Kawthar. We have given you the Kawthar. Why does it say that? Well, as I showed earlier, in Sahih Bukhari, we read that even some of the companions of the Prophet will not be able to drink from the Kawthar. And other ahadith say that many Muslims will not drink from the Kawthar. Only a small group of true believers who are going straight to paradise will drink from the river of Kawthar. Why is that? Well, at the same time, you may ask, how come no one else is performing salah in this way? How come we don't see any of these sects, any of these groups today, any of these Sufis or Shias or Salafis or any of these groups, or these big groups and small groups, all these sects, how come none of them are performing salah in this way? Well, the Quran is talking about Kawthar. Kawthar is not just paradise. Kawthar is a river that very few believers will drink from. Only those who are going straight to paradise without being punished first, only they will drink from Kawthar. So that also explains why we don't see anyone performing salah in this way. You see, because this is only a small group of people, so it makes perfect sense. The hadith fits in with what I'm saying, because if you ask, how come no one else is doing this except you? Well, the answer is given in the hadith that Kawthar is a very exclusive river, that even some of the Sahaba will not drink from it. Even some of the companions of the Prophet will not drink from Kawthar because of the sins that they committed, because of the things that they introduced after the Prophet. Okay? And that's of course referring to Muawiyah and his followers, those Sahaba who followed Muawiyah, and it was Muawiyah who altered the Salah, as I will explain later inshallah. It was Muawiyah who altered our Salah. So if you want to know why our Salah is different today, it began from Muawiyah, and that's why the hadith says that even some of the Sahaba will not drink from the Kawthar, because some of the Sahaba joined Muawiyah, and they actually admitted that they later changed their salah. It is admitted, it's stated in the hadith, in the narrations of the Sahaba, that Muawiyah altered the salah and the Muslims started performing salah differently. And I'll be showing you the evidence on future videos. But here is the reason why we don't see people today performing salah in this way. And we don't see this being mentioned in the books of fiqh of the Hanafis or the Malikis or the Shafis and Hanbalis in general. Although I believe that there were individuals who did perform salah correctly, but who were censored. And as it says in the hadith that the religion will be revived every new century. So after 100 years, the religion will need to be revived all over again. So the correct knowledge of how to perform salah will be forgotten. And the reason why it is so important for Satan to make us forget how to perform salah correctly, and Satan gives us all these fake choices between the Shafi'i way and the Hanbali Salafi way and the Hanafi way and the Maliki and Shia and Khawarij way of performing salah. The reason why we are giving all these different salahs and the salahs of the Sufis, and some Sufis dance instead of, they say that dancing is salah. There are many different types of salah. The reason why Satan gives us all these fake choices is that Satan doesn't want us to kill him. Satan doesn't want us to stab him, to injure him, to make him leave our body, or to actually kill him, because you can actually kill the shayateen as well. Okay, so if you do this, if you perform salah correctly, you can even kill your shaitan. You can even kill the shayateen that are trying to control you. And shaitan obviously doesn't want this. That's why it's so important for shaitan to stop you from performing salah in this correct way. And I'm telling you, when you do this, you will feel a lot of changes. And I've been doing this for a while now, and I've been seeing some strange things happening ever since I started performing salah like this. And I will explain about this on future videos. So you see, it makes perfect sense. So now let's read the next ayah. So the first ayah is, verily we gave you the river of Kawthar, the river of paradise, which very few believers will drink from. Only a select group of Muslims will actually drink from this river. Very few, not even all the companions, not even all the Sahaba. And then it says, so perform salah by placing your hands on your neck as if you're stabbing shaitan. So you see, it's connected to the previous ayah. He's saying, because we have given you the river of Kawthar, perform salah in this way. Other people are not going to perform salah in this way, but you who have been given the river of Kawthar, perform salah and place your hands as if you're stabbing the neck. And you're not stabbing your own neck. The next ayah says, it is your enemy who is being stabbed. It is your enemy who will be cut off. It is your shaitan who is being stabbed, not you. So you're not stabbing yourself, because the question will come up in your mind when you read this. So are we supposed to stab ourselves? No, you're stabbing the shaitan within yourself. So we have given you the river of Kawthar, therefore perform salah by stabbing the shaitan within your own body. Because only if you do this will you drink from the river of Kawthar. Other people will not drink from it. If the people who innovated the salah, such as the people who followed Muawiyah and his followers, they will not drink from the river of Kawthar. Only those who fight against the shaitan in their body, only those who do not sell out to the shayateen, who do not compromise with the shayateen, who are not scared of the shayateen, only those who are at war against the shayateen, who are stabbing and killing the shayateen within their own bodies, only they will drink from the river of Kawthar. Do you see how much sense it makes, and how little the Shia and Abbasid tafasir, how little sense they make? Remember, those interpretations make absolutely no sense, especially their interpretation of the second ayah. It makes no sense at all. And the interpretation that I just gave makes sense of every single ayah, and it's literal. I'm not making up some mumbo jumbo interpretation. That's what the Quran is actually saying. And the only reason some people will reject my explanation of the second ayah is that they would say, but there's no hadith that says we have to place our hands on our neck. I say, yes, but the hadiths are full of contradictions in regards to how to perform salah. The hadith, some of them say we have to place our hands like the Hanafis, some like the Shafi'is, some like the Hanbalis. So which is it? Which is it? The answer is already in the Quran, and we don't need the hadith when we have the Quran, because the Quran is the best hadith. As the Quran says, and in what hadith after Allah and His ayat will you believe in? As I explained before, this doesn't mean that we have to reject every hadith, but it means that we must reject every hadith that contradicts the Quran. And in this case, every hadith contradicts the Quran. When the Quran is giving you the answer, you don't need a hadith. As I said earlier, even if the Quran was just a hadith book, if the Quran was simply a hadith book that was much older and much more authentic than all the other hadith books, why would we go to those less authentic hadith books? If we had a hadith book from Ali or from Omar or from Uthman or from Abu Bakr, do we need Bukhari's hadith book? Do we need Ahmad ibn Hanbal's hadith book? Do we need Ibn Majah's hadith book? Do we need Kulaini's hadith book? No. We would just follow the hadith book written by Ali ibn Abi Talib, by Umar ibn Khattab, right? And yet we have something even better than that. We don't have a hadith book narrated by Omar from the Prophet or by Ali from the Prophet. We have a hadith book that are the ahadith of Allah. They are the direct words of Allah that no one can change, that no one can alter, which are perfect and they never contradict. Whereas the ahadith in Sahih Bukhari contradict each other. The ahadith in Sahih Muslim, Sunan Tirmidhi, Sunan Abu Dawud, they contradict each other. And on this very issue, they all contradict each other over where to place your hands. On your chest, in the middle of your chest, or at the bottom of your chest, or at the near your navel, or as the Shias and the Khawarij say, on your flanks. Which is it? The answer is in the Quran. We don't need the hadith when we have the answer in the Quran. We do need the Messenger of Allah. We do need the ahadith of the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him. But when the answer is already in the Quran, why are you searching for the answer in the hadith book? You are disrespecting the Quran. And the Quran is making perfect sense when you reject these false interpretations. Soorah Al-Kawthar is making perfect sense. We don't need these ridiculous interpretations when the surah itself makes perfect sense. We don't need to say perform salah and kill an animal, when the ayah is clearly saying perform salah by placing your hands on your neck as if you're making a stabbing motion. And the next ayah explains why we are making the stabbing hand movement. It's not that we're stabbing ourselves. Inna shanaka, your enemy is the one who is being stabbed, not yourself. So you don't get a physical knife and stab yourself with an actual knife or a spear in your own neck. No, you're spiritually stabbing shaitan, not yourself. That's why you don't actually carry an actual weapon and stab yourself. The next ayah explains it further and it makes perfect sense. It's beautiful. It's beautifully stated, and yet we are going after Tafsir Ibn Kathir. We are going after the Tafathir and the Ahadith of Bukhari and others. We don't need those books when the answer is already given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yes, as I said, I have been going through some I've been having some spiritual experiences ever since I've started doing this, and it feels as if the shayateen are all, there are many shayateen that are all entering my body all at the same time. Ever since I started doing this, I feel like I'm killing more and more shayateen. And it's very, very strange. It's a very strange experience, but I think that if more people do this, they can help me in killing the shayateen, because I feel like I'm battling against hundreds or thousands of shayateen, of devils. And if you all do this, if more people do this, it would make my job easier, because I actually really I actually feel like I've been having experiences as if there are many shayateen entering my body. Like every time I kill one, another one enters, or another group of shayateen enter, and I'm constantly stabbing them. And I've been having some strange experiences, and I've been healing. I was very sick, and ever since I started doing this, I've been getting better. And yet, even though I'm getting better, I've been getting similar experiences shortly after, and once again I perform salah, and it's as if every time I'm killing a shaitan. Every time I perform salah like this, I'm killing or injuring or stabbing one of the shayateen. And that is why it's very important that more Muslims perform salah in this way, because we're actually making a spiritual war against the shayateen. And that's why it's such a huge conspiracy. It's such an important conspiracy for the shayateen and their awliya and their followers, the awliya al-shaitan, these fake scholars, to stop us from performing salah in this way. And before I make the second part of this video, I just want to advise you that when you perform salah, that you move, if you're living in the West, that you move slightly right, slightly towards the east, just slightly move your qibla to the east a little bit. And if you're living in East Asia, move your qibla slightly to the west. And I'll explain the reason why on future videos. And on the next video, we will be inshallah discussing the issue of ruku and sujood, how to perform sujood, and the truth about the movement of ruku. And I'll be explaining that there is actually that movement when you bend your back, and they call it ruku. That movement is actually not part of our salah. Ruku does not mean to bend your back. That's not the meaning of ruku, and that's something I'll be leaving for the next video, inshallah. So I'm gonna advise you. I'm not gonna show the proof on this video. I'm gonna prove it on the next video. But I'm gonna advise you not to do that movement. Just go straight for sujood, for prostration. When you're standing for your salah, and when you recite the Quran, afterwards go straight for prostration, for sajda, and move your qibla slightly towards the east if you are living in the west. It's just slightly, just a little bit to the east, just a tiny bit to move your qibla to the east. And if you're living in China or East Asia, move your qibla slightly to the west. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.